Welcome everybody to Walking Between Shadows. We're your host. I'm Ben.
I'm Karen.
And this week we're going back to an old school case in West Tennessee,
Yeah.
specifically northeast West Tennessee. I know that's weird, but just look at the square, you'll figure it out.
Right.
So this is a case from the area of Dover, Tennessee,
Yes.
small town in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
And the area of Land Between the Lakes. So for you that don't know, the Kentucky Lake that's up there is split by a landmass into what is the Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley, called Land Between the Lakes.
Yes.
And years ago, I do recall a resort being built there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's still in operation. I mean, I think that was probably built in the 70s or
Right.
early 80s, about the time this crime occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a unique thing about this is that you'll see as we get into this a little more, you'll see there's some kind of ongoing or lingering conditions from the crime that never changed.
Yeah, sure.
Here we are, what is it, 44 years later?
44 years later, right exactly in the smack middle of this case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, September of 1980, Karen,
Yes.
I was still eating baby food.
Well, I'm a little older than you, but I was very young.
A little?
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Whatever.
I was 4 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get the feel of this because we grew up late 80s, knowing what was going on, late 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of wanted to get the feel of 1980 in September of 1980.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and see, what's some popular songs in 1980, and Upside Down by Diana Ross was the number one song. Yeah, well, the number one song on September the 17th of 1980. So I want to talk about this case. This is it's interesting and it's devastating.
Yeah.
So like I said, we're going back to September 17th of 1980. This was a Wednesday, and 2 sisters by the names of Carla Atkins, who was 14 years old, and her half-sister, her name was Vicky Stout, and she was 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So these 2 girls decided to skip school that day. And Carla was a student at, it was Dover Elementary School, which sounds very weird to say a 14-year-old was in elementary school, but I think back in that time,
they just had the 2 schools. There wasn't a middle school.
Okay. And Vicky Stout, Vicky Stout, that's right. She was a student at the Stewart County High School.
Mm-hmm.
So these 2 girls decided to skip school this day, though, and stay home. And this was the second day in a row that they had skipped school. So they skipped the Tuesday and they skipped this Wednesday. And they decided to go for a walk that afternoon and they went to the store. They were seen at IGA.
Yeah.
And some people say they were seen with Vicky's boyfriend, whose name was Randall Riggins. And that was just a couple of witnesses that say they saw that. And they were dropped off at the IGA by him, Randall Riggins. And from there, they walked past a little convenience store and bait shop called the Furnace.
So what kind of vehicle did Randall Riggins have? I think it's important just to mention that because you'll hear why in a little bit.
So witnesses say they saw the 2 girls in Randall Riggins' green and yellow van.
Mm-hmm.
So this would have been very standout, you know.
Yeah.
And so they walk to the Furnace, and witnesses see them walking on Highway 79 towards the Furnace. And they go to the Furnace, and there they buy cigarettes and bubble gum.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how big cigarettes were in the 80s for teenagers. Everybody thought, let's get out there and smoke a little bit. That's all the cool people are smoking.
Yeah.
And they were. Let's not lie. I mean, hey, I think I was smoking cigarettes at 14. And I know I was at 16. So these girls.
I stole a time or 2, but yeah.
Yeah. This reminds me very much of me and my sister. These 2 girls skipping school and going to get cigarettes.
Yeah.
So they're seen outside the Furnace, and they are talking to a man in a blue pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A couple witnesses saw them talking to this man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last time these two girls are seen. Two sisters, very odd. When they don't return home that afternoon, their mother, Margie Atkins, calls the juvenile missing persons unit.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we said that they were seen that day with Randall Riggins. But the truth of the matter is that Randall Riggins and their brother, Randy Stout,
Mm-hmm.
and a friend of theirs by the name of Bobby Morgan were all reported to go to or scheduled to go to Stewart County Jail that day. So the three boys were all charged with marijuana possession charges.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that means that Randall Riggins was quite a bit older than Vicky. And this was her boyfriend. So, she was 16. So he must have been out of school and old enough to be charged and put into jail for possession.
Yeah.
So, that was said now, but it's very unclear if Randall Riggins actually did go to jail that day. It's clear that Randy Stout
Mm-hmm.
and that Bobby Morgan did go to jail that day. But different people say that Randall Riggins was not in jail
Where
with
did they
these
go to
boys.
jail?
Stewart County Jail.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, these three boys that was something that was going on that day. I think they had to report on September the 17th.
Yeah.
It's also said that Carla and Vicky were supposed to testify in neighboring Henry County the next day in a different case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that was about, but I believe it was the same thing, like marijuana charges or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's kind of something that I found out. And I listened to this really good investigative podcast. It's called Murder at Land Between the Lakes. So I got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of this information from them, and they brought in, these two women did a great job. They brought in a lot of witnesses.
Yeah.
So this is where I got this information from, most of it. So these two girls didn't return that day. Their mother calls the missing persons unit. Okay. And everybody's thinking they just probably are out, run away, went
Mm-hmm.
to a friend's house and lost track of time. They'll be
Yeah.
back the next day.
Well, and it sounds like they spent time in Henry County too. And just to let
Yeah.
everybody know, Henry County was across the river. So it wasn't like it was right next to where they were.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a drive from Dover over to what's called Paris Landing, which is right there at the river. And it's a further 20 or 30 miles to Paris
Mm-hmm.
from
Mm-hmm.
there. So
Yeah.
they could have just been over there and lost track of time,
Mm-hmm.
people may have thought.
Yeah. Or they run away.
Yeah.
Either one. And back in 1980, that was probably the first thing that came into police minds is
Mm-hmm.
that these girls run away. But September the 18th, when they still hadn't shown up or went to school, the truancy officer shows up at the trailer where the girls lived. And this is when this kind of kicked into motion,
Mm-hmm.
this investigation. So, days go by
Mm-hmm.
and rumors are rampant in this small town. And witnesses are coming forth and saying, I saw the girls at 3:30 in the afternoon, approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, walking down Highway 79.
Mm-hmm.
And another witness came forth and said, look, I was driving by the furnace and I saw the two girls talking to a man in a blue pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
So she called and reported this to law enforcement. So just a few hours after she called and reported this, the sheriff by the name of David Hicks at the time shows up at this woman's house and he says, you don't need to report this and you don't need to talk about this. You're an elderly woman, you live alone, and it's too much of a risk. And he shut her down. That's what she claims.
This was the witness that claimed to see him.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, days go by. Not only this, but on the day of that these girls went missing,
Mm-hmm.
their Uncle Joe, who lived right down the hill from Lost Creek area of Land Between the Lakes, he hears two gunshots and he sees a blue truck and a brown car racing away from the area
Mm-hmm.
where he heard the shots and away from the Lost Creek area. He reported this and he urged police to go out there and check, but 18 days go by and there's some hikers out walking around and hiking in the Lost Creek area of Land Between the Lakes,
Mm-hmm.
and they smell decomposition. So they call law enforcement. And when law enforcement arrives, they come upon a pretty gory scene. They find um, both the bodies of the girls, Vicky and Carla, about 75 feet apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like someone tried to cover them up with leaves and sticks and things.
Yeah.
Very shallow grave.
Yeah.
There was also brain matter and fragments of skull and hair on the trees
Mm-hmm.
and around the area.
Mm-hmm.
They found 2 shells, I believe, or 1 shell to a 12 gauge shotgun. So these 2 girls were sent off for autopsies in Memphis, and it was determined they were both shot in the back of the head with a 12 gauge shotgun.
Good.
It had been too long for too much time had passed and too much decomposition on the girls' bodies for examiners to tell whether or not there was any sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's something else. Now, um, the investigation starts, and immediately the TBI, along with the sheriff's department, Stewart County Sheriff's Department, come to the scene, and they're immediately start improperly handling some of the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're bagging multiple evidence pieces into one big plastic bag.
Yeah.
And it said that this TBI officer was the one doing this by the name of Jack Carlton. So he takes all this evidence and he puts it in his car and reports all the evidence stolen out of his vehicle.
Mm. Yeah. Right.
Right. So that's what was reported.
So, I mean, first off, you always want to sequester evidence individually,
Yes. Yes.
and they're saying that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then this TBI agent announces that it had been stolen from his car.
Right.
In what world would somebody want to rob evidence from a TBI agent at this point? Unless
Right.
they
I mean,
knew what was going on.
unless
Unless
they
they
knew.
knew about it.
True. True. So there was mishandling
Mm-hmm.
for from the get go on this case.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about what a big deal that is. I mean, these are 2 young girls with all this life in front of them. And it makes me wonder what they were involved in. I mean, like how deep did it go?
Yeah. What was going on that it warranted their death, first of all?
Right. And listening to some of the interview with Carla's best friend, Ruby,
Mm-hmm.
in this podcast I listened to, it seemed very innocent. I mean, it took me back to even when I was 14 years old and hanging out with my best friend. And, it was just, these girls sounded like they were a lot of fun. I mean, Ruby said she went over there to spend the night with the 2 girls one night.
Yeah.
And they shared a bedroom. And she said they had this big, like, wardrobe mirror, like the vanity mirror in their room. And where they would put their makeup and stuff on, but they had taken fingernail polish paint and just made the mirror beautiful, like hearts and flowers, and they would change it out every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
So she got the idea that she was going to go home and do the same thing. And Carla came and spent the night with her,
Yeah.
and they just did that to her vanity mirror. And her mother wasn't quite pleased with it.
Mm-mm.
But, that's just little things like that. And their favorite thing was bubblegum, Bubblicious bubblegum,
Yeah.
and listening to records. And it was very innocent.
Yeah.
Vicky, on the other hand, I mean, she was a little bit older, very fun loving. Both these girls were said to be super smart. about everything
Mhm.
and would have not gotten into a vehicle with someone they did not know. But it's also said that the day that they did go missing, the September the 17th,
Yeah.
Vicky told her boyfriend, Randall Riggins, that she was possibly pregnant. So, I mean, keep that in mind while,
Mhm.
through the investigation. But, this case just kind of started becoming cold.
Mhm.
And with improper handling of evidence and things like that, I mean, what a mess.
Yeah. So there was a point in this that a composite sketch was released.
Right. So in 2011, there was a new sheriff that was brought into Stewart County's sheriff's office. And he kind of reopened this a little bit more and tried to look back into this.
Mhm.
But the TBI had soon after that had taken all this information and sealed the case. I
Yeah.
mean, you know how that works with the TBI.
Yeah.
So once anything that they've got their hands on anything, even if a case is closed, they will not come off any information on this case
Right.
or any case. I mean, that's it. And some people think it's because, I mean, over the years, there's been several people that have tried to change that law a little bit and say, after 25 years, can we release something?
Yeah.
But no,
To no avail.
to no avail. And a lot of people believe that's because TBI is also who investigates all law enforcement in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
So if law enforcement did something wrong, like improper handling, they don't want that coming out.
Right.
Yeah. So that happened in 2011. And in 2015, there was a new district attorney that comes into town
Mhm.
by the name of Ray Crouch. And he's a younger guy,
Mhm.
and he's known to prosecute and push forward with a lot of things. Um, he is not tied to this area,
Mhm.
no friends, no family from this area, which I think that there's several district attorneys up in one I can think of in the 13th that needs to take notes on this. But yeah, he's pushed forward with this, and he got the FBI involved.
Mhm.
So in 2015, the FBI becomes involved with this case, which you would think from the very beginning they would. There was sketches released in 2015 as well from the TBI,
Mhm.
and their age progressed sketches.
Mhm.
I think the last age would have been around 2014 was the last sketch for the oldest he would have been.
Okay.
Um, and nothing really came of, people came for, there was that podcast I was talking about, a lot of people started talking then about this.
Mhm.
And in 2019, Ray Crouch takes some of this evidence and goes down to a special testing laboratory in Florida.
Mhm.
And this did yield some results.
Like what? But did they ever tell what the results were?
They did not, because it's going to take further testing. So right now, from my understanding, all this testing has been put at a standstill because of expenses. It's very expensive to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it still stands unsolved.
Mhm.
44-year-old cold case.
Mhm.
And the people in this town still will talk about this,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
Yeah. So the theory is, or some of the theories are that these girls could have been testifying in court September the 18th, and somebody didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
And there's also theories, a police theory, that these girls were picked up by somebody they knew and taken out to this secluded area. And you and I talked about this earlier today. I mean, maybe they were being taken out there to smoke or something like that.
Mhm.
Like a little weed, you want to come smoke.
Mhm.
But when they get out there, one of the sisters was accidentally shot, and the
Mhm.
other one became collateral damage.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's another thing that has been said about this case.
Mhm.
One of the theories.
Well,
So, I
what about the
mean,
boyfriend and her supposedly being pregnant or possibly?
autopsy did not claim that she was pregnant, and I don't know that they could have told because of the decomposition.
Yeah.
But now the boyfriend. So I don't know. Since this all went down, I listened to one of the siblings of Carla and Vicky, and he stated that they just wanted Randall Riggins to come forth and
Mm-hmm.
just and they don't think they're not saying he did it. They
Mm-hmm.
just want him to come answer some questions about that day, like maybe were you in jail? You know what's going on. And over the years, there were like 30 suspects, and I think in 2019, Ray Crouch had that down to about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I mean, because how many people can have blue trucks? And I guess they probably looked into the brown car that Uncle Joe saw leaving the scene too that day. But, it seems like if it would have been the boyfriend, Randall Riggins, then somebody would have known he had a blue truck or had one available to him. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, and for them, like I just keep going back to why they waste their time with the boyfriend. I mean, he drove a van.
Well, yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean,
But did he know who had a blue pickup?
right.
Mm.
I mean, right. And if he was, here's another thing. If he was to turn himself into jail that day, earlier that day, and he decided not to, did he use somebody else's vehicle? Or was
Right.
he riding with somebody else just so the police wouldn't know, to come look for him for cavius?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's a theory too. I mean, like, so I don't know. This is one of those cases that you just don't know. Was it an outsider? Was it a serial killer? I don't
Well,
know.
it was mentioned in one of the podcasts even that the scene where this occurred, there was a bridge that went to that road or was part of that road out to
Yes.
the scene,
Mm-hmm.
and it was closed for the investigation. And here we are, 44 years later, it's never been reopened.
Kind of like Lover's Lane.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
It was just left to grow over and disappear into
Yeah.
the wilderness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Like a ghost town.
yeah,
That entrance is to that park anyway, or
yeah,
that area.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very interesting. I mean, and to be so old, it could go any direction.
Right. I mean, these girls were just starting their life out. And
Yeah.
it's devastating for a town. Can you imagine being a friend of theirs and going to school and these girls for 18 days they're missing, which I'd be terrified being that young and then finding out they're brutally murdered.
Yeah, and living all this time knowing that,
Right.
and knowing that they were never caught, the perpetrator was never caught.
And the mayor of Dover now, his
Mhm.
name is Robin Brandon. He is actually close to this case because he's married to a relative of Carla and Vicky.
Yeah.
So on September the 17th of 2020, he declared that day a day of remembrance for the two.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know back in when all this went down, the governor, who was, I believe it was Lamar Alexander in 1980. All right.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I believe it was Lamar Alexander, but he did post a $2,500 reward.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2016, the new governor at that time was Bill Haslam,
Mm-hmm.
and he changed that to $5,000 reward.
Mm-hmm.
So people are still very interested.
Yeah.
And a lot of people around this area still feel like this guy is still out there and he could still be walking the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an interview with a guy that looked just like the composite sketch?
He was actually a journalist that David Ross, I believe is his name. Yeah, he did look a lot like and I went on Reddit and I even saw where people said that, wow, this guy
Mm-hmm.
really looks a lot like this sketch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Well, um, yeah. Well, I just want to make sure that you know, people remember these cold cases.
Yes.
It's like we say in every one of them. If you know something, say something.
I mean, it
You
just
know?
really sets the stage for the whole community look
Yeah.
at it, 44 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, it feels so wrong. It feels like such an injustice
Mm-hmm.
that, first of all, that it's believed that law enforcement did not want to share this case with even the TBI. But then for the TBI who mishandle evidence like
Mm-hmm.
they did, you know, this is the whole reason why the DA decided to ask the FBI to help out because
Mm-hmm.
of the evidence that was mishandled.
Yeah.
And it just, excuse my language, fucked it up from the very get go. So, I mean, at least you see this district attorney pushing and doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's definitely an interesting case.
Yes.
And it's going to be interesting if they find anything else out about it. I mean, I've said, to you in conversation about it that the only way some of these cases are going to get solved is if somebody with a lot of money comes in and pays for the testing or pays for, whatever it takes.
And I have no idea how much it cost
Right.
to test. Like I said, this test that's been sent to Florida has been put on hold because of the expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So as of right now, it's sitting there. There could be a possible result,
Mm-hmm.
but it needs some further testing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate. It
Mm.
really is. So I want to let everybody know we appreciate you watching us, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the notifications bell. But the most important thing we ask you to do is share these videos.
Yes.
Um, Surely, at some point, somebody out there does know something and can talk about it. So maybe it'll spark some, memories in people and maybe help find a resolution.
Yeah.
So again, thank you, and hit that like and subscribe button, and most importantly, share these videos, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.